Welcome to another edition of the MNCAA podcast, Big Ten edition, alongside Nate Wells here. I am Drew Cove. Nick Maxon, late scratch out of today's pod, but we wish him to get well. Late scratches, and he wasn't feeling too good. So hopefully he's feeling good on this Sunday evening as we record. It's Sunday evening after the Gophers end their season. There's no hiding it, Nate. I know we were going to talk about the first game first, but there's no hiding it. The Gopher season is over. In case you have been living under a rock, the Gophers beat Omaha and then lost to BU on Saturday 6-3. Obviously not the way this Gophers team wanted to end this season. A few games too early, but let's start talking about the Omaha game, Nate. And what were your general thoughts from that opening game against a team that maybe a lot of Minnesota fans or like Minnesota-based college hockey fans are pretty familiar with, being kind of in a pretty close conference with some of the other teams in the state?
It played up to how exactly we thought it might be, where just, a lot of very physical. Both teams are going to bring the action. Goals may be to premium, but at the same time, we've seen Minnesota all season come in and find ways to come back. They're never out of a game. They have that resiliency that we can trademark. Every college hockey coach will bring it at the end of the game. But I mean, look, Minnesota, they came back from 1-0. They came back from a 2-1 deficit in the third period. And Omaha did not give them very many chances, but when they had the opportunities, they certainly took advantage of it. And you looked and you saw those college hockey NCAA tournament experience from the veterans, from Bryce Brodzinski, from Jackson Nelson, while he also had a nice early goal, like a late second period goal from Jimmy Clark that was able to keep Minnesota into it before the end of the second period, because going down 1-0 at the end of two is slightly different than being tied entering the third. So it seemed to me it was a performance by Minnesota you would really expect from this year's Gopher team, even against a tough Omaha opponent. And it was great to see for Minnesota, where you have a guy who's been there the longest in Jackson Nelson. You include the 4 years of being recruited. You had a guy who just got on campus in August and Jimmy Clark in the goal. And it was great to see. I remember 6 years ago, Bob Motzko went to the last time they played in Sioux Falls. Bob Motzko was there with his St. Cloud State team. It was right after Don Lucia stepped down. They're playing as the number 1 overall. They lose to Air Force. They go home. By Wednesday, he's the Minnesota head coach. And just kind of you see those little small things in the college hockey world. But, it was great to see Bob Motzko this time, especially a place that he has a lot of history with the Sioux Falls Stampede, get that win in Sioux Falls.
Yeah, and it was certainly not without its, like you mentioned, kind of the deficits the Gophers came back from. And obviously the way the Gophers scored their go-ahead goal that ended up being the winner, I think with about 4.5 minutes left. Omaha skater blows a tire, falls on the ice. I mean, just loses an edge, and boom, there's Jackson Nelson to kind of recover and take the puck. Obviously, he did do what he needed to do, and he could have very well not capitalized on that. And we'll get to more instances. That's a bit of foreshadowing to some of the conversation about the BU game. But Omaha skater blows a tire. A lot of people were saying, including friends of the show, GPL, saying that the ice looked very, very brittle. And it looked like, and even just watching the game on TV, it did look like there was a lot of bouncy pucks and a lot of kind of phantom trips, phantom falls. But obviously the Gophers, when you at this time of the year, if you're thinking from that game in a vacuum, you're saying, wow, that's the type of opportunity that needs to happen and you need to capitalize on if you're going to go the distance in the NCAA tournament. Obviously they didn't do that, but what are your thoughts kind of on just the ability to capitalize on any chance you're given, even if it's just kind of an absolutely gift wrapped one like that?
That's exactly what you need to be able to do with single elimination, where you limit mistakes, you take advantage of opportunities. And even Minnesota, I mean, on the other side of Omaha, they got a 5-minute major cradling the first and second periods that, it was originally called 2 minutes. The refs or Omaha challenged it. They went in to look at it. And just watching the replays, I was kind of really surprised to see that be a 5. But so on either end, that not everything's going to go your way. And in this time of year, no one ends up going 4 games without having some sort of adversity or some sort of moments where the pendulum swings the other way. And it's how you can take advantage of those opportunities. and how you can limit the mistakes, and just when things are not going your way, you can limit it from stepping out and getting out of hand really quickly. And then with Minnesota, it's that Justin Close played well in that Thursday night game. They didn't get out of hand during the major. And when they had the opportunities to score, when they needed to score, especially in that third period, Jackson Nelson stepped up. And I mean, really credit to Nelson and Brodzinski and those fifth-year seniors, because they left the program. They're leaving the program a lot better than they left it. You feel just the team, and we'll get this a little bit more, but like you feel that this team, the program is in a much better place. But they also had the last 3 years of those NCAA tournament experience. Well, the disappointing thing is that they're going to leave without being able to raise that gold banner. You still have to be extremely happy with where it's, you win a game all 3 years, you have 2 Frozen Fours, and you are players who scored and made your mark in 3 NCAA tournaments. That's not an easy feat to do. That really puts you up there in the Gopher lore.
Yeah, and you got to think that these types of guys have really set, like you said, set the program up for a lot of the guys. Maybe some of these younger guys on the team are the beneficiaries of their good work and being able to raise a gold banner, and they'll be able to go back and say, "Wow, that I remember skating with these guys, and they became much better college hockey players when we were around." Not to kind of pat themselves on the back, but they have to realize deep down that a lot of these guys had to have had an impact on the younger guys on the team right now, and see what they can do with it going forward. But obviously, Nate, you mentioned adversity. Jackson Nelson, I think that was the story of the game on Saturday as well. Obviously, the Gophers get out to a hot start. With Jackson Nelson scoring on his birthday, that 3 goals in 2 games in the regional, and just kind of continuing that heater he was on through the end of the season. But then obviously a pretty upsetting goal from the Gophers standpoint against one that's kind of a broken play in the inside, and it's just a shot from the side that hits just a close skate and heads into the net. Just fighting through adversity at that point. Just seeing some of these goals that went against the Gophers on Saturday, and say, boy, they're going to need to be able to recover, or like make up for it in some other areas. What are your thoughts, just kind of on like you said, the lead that they had, and kind of fighting back through some of those goals that you wish you could have back?
Oh, for that Thursday and then the first part of Saturday, how much of a rider were you just like, okay, thank you. This is golden stories. It's you got the almost hometown kid in his last tournament who's been there forever, making his mark, and he keeps going there. And then he has on his birthday on Saturday. The Gophers survive an early onslaught by BU. They are showing why they're the number 2 team in entering the NCAA tournament, and why they are made the Frozen Four. The reloaded and added on to with the insane freshman class. You have Lane Hudson with another extra year. You could probably name about 7 other players to kind of showcase there. For me, my money, they might be, when BU is on, they're the best team in college hockey. They haven't consistently shown it this year, and that's kind of been the difference, I think, between BC and them. But when they're on, and they do have that Frozen Four experience, they are a very, very scary team. So it wasn't a surprise, even when Minnesota's up 2-0, and they're taking advantage of those opportunities that we just mentioned. They're playing their game. They're playing with BU. They've kind of shown the entire year that this is a very good team. This is a top 10 team that they can play with anybody. And yet you still just in the back of your head, you're not feeling that comfortable with the 2-0 lead. You know that the Terriers have the firepower. They have the ability to make teams pay. And you're just thinking, do you need one more? Is 2 enough? Can you get this going for 2.5 periods? And it really wasn't a shock to see by about the 5-minute mark, but all of a sudden 2-0 was 3-2, and of the second period. Just from there, you're kind of chasing. You're trying to get those opportunities going to create. And I mean, credit to the Gophers. It was a very good game. It was kind of emblematic of their season that they're a very good team. They're able to play with anyone this season, but you see those small differences between a very good and a great team. And that was, for me, that was the difference in Saturday's game. And this is why we're talking a little bit more of a postmortem with the Gophers rather than bringing up, hey, let's go to St. Paul 3 in a row.
Yeah, and as the season was going on too, I know I was saying a lot of the time, like, wow, when Jackson Nelson is on, this Gophers team is on. But The rest of the team didn't necessarily follow this time around. Obviously, there were a lot of points to go around in the high scoring game overall, but yeah, besides Jackson Nelson and Bryce Brodzinski and those, and I know I said I was saying to the people I was watching with, I'm like, when Bryce has that shot, like that's a shot that can beat anybody, and like that's the kind of like wicked type of shot you really need to make that kind of chance against a team that's going to have tons of chances against you. So just to get one that's just kind of streaking into the zone and boom, you just rip one past him. You need all those goals you can get. But saying that too, this team, what you've been saying all year is depth, and we needed more than Jackson Nelson and Bryce Brodzinski on Saturday, and it just didn't happen. And even when those two guys got more chances as the game went on, it was just they capitalized on the opportunities in the first part of the game, but when the game was kind of in dire straits and they needed to capitalize on a couple of odd man rushes and breaks, they weren't able to finish. And just kind of finding where some of those guys were. It's like they were not fighting the puck all day. It's like you noticed Snuggerud taking shots. You noticed Oliver Moore flying down. You noticed Rhett Pitlick on the forecheck, but it just didn't materialize for those guys in Saturday's game.
That's just the difference where you're looking at these two teams when they played last year versus this year. And I mentioned this on Twitter during the game where it felt like the difference was Minnesota last year had Logan Cooley, Matty Nyes. They had those high-end impact players. This year with Celebrini, with Lane Hudson, it's more on the BU side. And you can still win. They still have the depth. And we mentioned throughout for the second half and for much of the season, the way for Minnesota to win is to utilize their depth, to utilize their experience, to get good goaltending, to have everyone on their A game when you're playing these great teams. And unfortunately for Minnesota, you saw flashes of it, but it wasn't there for the entire bit. But for me, this weekend for Minnesota and Sioux Falls was the Gopher season. You saw a great team. You're able to withstand so many high-end losses to the pros, the players that were on last year's team who are making impacts right away in the NHL, and you're still a top 6, top 7 team in the nation. You one win away from the Frozen Four, and able to reload and able to build a consistent program. And I think we mentioned each year in, year out, you're not going to always have that team that's going to be that top, we're the best team in the country every year. But the more shots that you give yourself, the more opportunities that you can consistently reload. And that's only a handful of teams in the nation that are able to do that year in, year out. But I think you can put Minnesota at least in that list, in that list of few where you're talking about Denver, you're talking about Michigan, you're talking, it's the last few, it's pretty much, it's those two. UMD's been off for a bit, but they're in there. Mm-hmm. BC had a stretch, but yeah, it's pretty much, it's a very small list of teams that are kind of in that consistently reload year in, year out. And I mean, that's the credit to Motzko, the program, and the players who are leaving right now, where it's disappointing how it ended, but looking at kind of the big picture and kind of looking at this 2023, 24 team, you feel it's a great one for the program, even if it ends a little disappointing and ends a game or two before you really would hope it would.
Mm-hmm. And you think about just all the guys, like you mentioned, all the guys that they lost after last year. And I don't think anyone was reasonably saying, I mean, this is a Frozen Four team or bust, or like we're canceling our tickets kind of thing. But I think reasonably a lot of people said, you know what, they'll be a tournament team. But beyond that, it's just up to the younger guys to sort of show what they mean and what they are. But like you said, like when Cooley and Nyes and like all those guys were here last year, like anytime they touch the puck, you're like, wow, something good could happen. We talked about that a lot last year. And I feel like in this game specifically against BU, anytime Lane Hudson had the puck, I was like, boy, this is scary. Like you're just like, if you're like you're just clenching, like, what is he going to do next? And then same with Celebrini. Like they have two of those guys that are just like so shifty, and like that all the no-look passes and assists that Celebrini had in that game. I think he only had 2 points, but like he had so many different like setup plays that just like left everyone in the entire arena just dumbfounded besides him. And anytime Lane Hudson had the puck, it's just like he's so good at making chances and saying like, all right, I think there's a chance here. Wait, nope. I'm going to keep the puck, keep it moving, keep it rolling. But it's like he has the puck for 40 seconds consistently. It's like, boy, what are you going to do with it? And you just know he's going to find something good to do with it. But that's just the difference. Yeah, like you said, between last year's team, Gophers team, and this BU team. I think they're similar in that they have those guys that can really fool the opposition almost regardless of what's happening. But you did mention just kind of this weekend being the Gophers season in a nutshell. And that kind of leads us, I think, to our next point, obviously in the post-mortem. But what do you think the final word on this team is? What would you say the identity of the 2023-24 Gophers team was this year?
I would say well-rounded. There was a lot of depth. They had they had a high-end talent. They were able to build towards something the end of the year much stronger than the beginning, which is what I think in the beginning of the year we were really hoping to see for Minnesota, where you're building towards February and March with your players. The defense needed to be almost completely rebuilt, and they certainly were not a liability in any sense. You had very high-end veteran leadership. Maybe the game breakers that you saw to be able to kind of hit that next level, they did not quite hit that. But at the same time, I will say that you end up that might be the difference for me is for this year's team is the only thing is where you're waiting to see some of those players, see if they can hit that next gear. And I guess in the same sense, we're going to see the same thing next season, where some of these young players who are going to be able to step up into new roles, make that next step there, where you saw talent, like if you're an Oliver Moore, if you're a Sam Renzel, like, hey, can you hit that next step as a sophomore that we saw Matty Nyes do, that we've seen Ben Myers do a couple of years before from his sophomore to junior year? Can Minnesota get that player? And that's going to be the difference. And I think for me that this is the difference for this year's team is maybe Rhett Pitlick was that guy, but I don't even know if you can say that. Like, just Minnesota did not have that one guy who took that very, very much needed next step. But it's still a very well-rounded team, and it's still a very hard team to play against. And it's great to see that Motzko has a program that is full of teams that are battling and are very tough outs, because let's just think back to where this program was when he took over. How many times were we talking about these are teams that need to learn how to win, that you can win when you're ahead. You don't know how to come back from games. You're not 100% sure holding back leads. And even this season, we were kind of seeing that at the beginning of the year where no lead was entirely safe. But you end up in the second half of the season, Minnesota came back. They were tough to play against, and you feel good about that. So that's kind of, I feel like that's my identity. It's depth, it's well-roundedness, but just you don't have that superstar or someone kind of taking over to the next iteration, the next gear.
Yeah, you just think that they're a piece or two away from what, like, obviously, and that kind of was last year too. It's just like they got even older, they got even more experienced. Because like I think they had every instance that they could have experienced through those older guys that have been with the team and into all these different tournaments, and to say, all right, we know how to progress things and how to handle this situation. We know how to handle this kind of situation. And even at the end of the season, I think even with the loss, they were 8-6-0 in 1-goal games. That's including the BU game. So, I mean, they found a way to really to maintain a lead when it was close and to come back when it was close the opposite way. But I think I'd just agree with you. It's a depth focused team. They had so many high impact guys, but not so many of the game breaker type. Boy, when you absolutely need a goal, you can 100% count on this person to make it happen and to have that higher end talent showcased through. But yeah, it's just
I was gonna say that does speak to the development we're going on there. Like, and we're talking a lot about the offense, like your Nelsons, your Brodzinskis, your Huglins, who got one on there, your Pitlicks. But at the same time, I mean, we can even go into like just think about Justin Close, just how he had to win a game when he came in there. I mean, that story is a guy who played over 100 games for Minnesota after basically being thrown to the Wolves after Jack LaFontaine left the top 5 team.
Yeah,
mid-season. And I mean, that really just says the difference between where everyone is developing, because this year he was the guy. He was the guy when needed to. You can almost count the number of just bad performances, bad games on one hand with him. And while it took pretty much to like a BU team that has godworthy talent with the number 1 draft pick coming up this year, one of the top, and several of the top prospects to get him moving and be able to get him out of a position and kind of make him look a little bit more like he was during his first season. That just really goes to show just the development. You're seeing that in Minnesota. And I think for me, that's the big thing where at least I'm taking away the season as a positive, even if it's going to be a little bit disappointing where there's several opportunities to be able to raise a banner at just Minnesota's. You're going to look back in 5-10 years and you're not going to see it up in the Mariucci arena rafters.
Yeah, it's too bad because especially when you think about these teams and just especially how talented last year's team was, and you think about it. I mean, even in the last season, it's like I know the guys on the that were on the roster this year wouldn't want to like say it like that, but like with the amount of talent that left the back end last year, like that was kind of a pivotal moment to like take all the advantages of all your experience in college hockey to really just push it through. And I feel like this year was a lot of like that for the forwards. Obviously, there was a lot of guys, 2 very high impact guys that departed after last season, but with the winning experience from the older guys that are leaving on up front, obviously Bryce Bradzinski, I think being number 1, is a guy who played the most games in a Gopher uniform ever. It's tough they're going to have to, that'll be a big question mark heading into next year, I think, besides the goaltending question and whether Aries ready, but like, it's going to be how can these forwards adjust with who's coming back and who can step up into those roles that are going to be really important for a team that wants to make the tournament and make the Frozen Four again and have a rebound and not just get back to where they were this year, but get back to where they obviously want to be as one of those Final Four teams. But yeah, I think obviously that kind of leads us to one of our next parts here, and just who is going to come back.
I was going to say, yeah, no, keep going.
No, just I want to get your thoughts, Nate, on who do you think is going to come back to this roster? Who, I mean, obviously we know who's the graduates and some of the seniors that are leaving, but from the question marks, I mean, we can say right now, yeah, that Justin Close leaving is going to be a gigantic question mark because just we've seen Nathan Airy play, and I thought he's looked pretty good in the games that are like competitive that he's played, rather than just like the development team. Even though they do give teams a run for their money now, it's not as much of like a given as it was, I think, like 10 years ago, because those guys are really, really talented. But you see, Close in goal, Jackson Nelson and Bryce Bradzinski up front, Mason Nevers, Carl Fish, Mike Kester, like some of those guys, like you saw the emotion on Mike Kester's face if you watched the broadcast, like he was just devastated. And because you can imagine, like he probably grew up wanting to get to that point of raising the national championship, but now it's over. But from the guys that are more question marks, Nate, I want to offer up, I think, number 1, Jimmy Snuggerud. What do you think is his potential coming back for next season?
I would be surprised if Jimmy Snuggerud comes back. I'd be very happy if Jimmy Snuggerud comes back from Minnesota if you're Bob Motzko and if you're that team. But you can make the argument that he could have left last year, and coming back was a great development for his game. He got a chance to be a leader. He got a chance to continue to work on his shot to make it NHL ready and work on that offense. And with the St. Louis Blues team that could really use him as a top prospect, it's tough to see. It's tough to see him coming back. I'd be surprised. Honestly, I would be shocked if he re-signed by the time that this podcast comes out. But if out of anyone that is going to be on this list, he's number 1 who I'm assuming he is gone. And if he still comes back and earlier, that's just great. That's an added bonus.
Mm-hmm. Another one, I think this is a dark horse that I think at least I hadn't thought about too much until the last few days. But what do you think about Rhett Pitlick? I mean, he's just completed his 3rd season with the Gophers. He was drafted, so I mean, he would have to come back and play another year if he wanted to, like, let those rights expire and sign with anyone. But do you think he wants to jump into that system, or do you think he wants to come back? And I mean, he did have 19 goals this year. I think it's kind of it's an interesting situation that he could present if he wanted to leave or if he wanted to stay.
Yeah, there's certainly a possibility if you strike while the iron's hot. Do I think that he's ready for pro hockey in the NHL? I don't know if I would. I think another year would be very beneficial to his game, but you can certainly make an argument. And honestly, there usually is somebody who ends up being a mystery signing, or at least thinks about and tries to look around. And also, I think also like he played at least a year or two of juniors too, right?
Yep.
Before after being drafted, like so he might have that. He can go the free agent route too. So that makes it really even more of a dark horse. I think what is Montreal is his rights.
Yep.
Probably should have done a little bit of homework on this one, but
no, it's all
so
good.
You can see. So that's another thing. You
a
can
lot of
kind
Montreal
see
draft picks with the
There's
Gophers.
a lot of
that's
yeah.
But
I try to think. I was like, yeah, because they've got quite a few Montreal, Kester's, Toronto, and I was just trying to remember who. See, so the Scott Bell there, so that makes sense.
Yeah, but and I think to my next point too, it's obviously on the younger end. I only ask this because while I was watching the broadcast and watching Mike Kester shed a few tears in his emotional state, I happened to see Oliver Moore standing near the door, also with some tears in his eyes. Obviously, I think he obviously takes the game very seriously, and he spent a lot of time this season and a lot of work to try and get to the national championship. But not trying to read into things too much, but like that was a very emotional end for a guy that I thought was. I was before that seeing that I was thinking he's coming back, but now what if he wants to sign? I don't know. I still think he's going to come back. I'm just a little bit more nudged in the other direction that he might be thinking about it. What do you think about that?
It's always tough when you're a first round pick and you have an organization that wants to get you. I mean, we just talked about Jimmy Snuggerud with St. Louis. St. Louis, they wanted to get him in last year as well. And he looked around and just like, I need to work a little bit more on my game. And the best route for that is to spend another year in college and develop. And when I'm ready for pro hockey in the NHL, I want to be able to jump right in. Maybe you look and see how some of the other his other past teammates have been able to do that and have that extra year coming around. Mm-hmm. I feel the same way with Oliver Moore, where, he certainly took some steps and he faced adversity, especially in that first half of needing to figure out, hey, how can his game work for college? That college adjustment is tough for everybody. Or maybe, hey, your shot's going to be able to get through at some point, and it's not here. Players are bigger. Players are faster. You need to find other ways to get around. And that step is even greater once you're hitting the professional ranks. So for me, I think the smart, for me, I shouldn't even say that. I think the smart decision is because, like, I'm not an advisor. I'm not a hockey GM or development person on this end, but with how his development has gone and just how you're seeing the development of college hockey players, it doesn't make a lot of sense for have Oliver Moore come back and even kind of do what Jimmy Snuggerud did, where you're taking on a new role. You're being more of a leader. You're leading your own line instead of being a very complimentary part of it. So there's a lot of there's a lot of parts there with Moore. And I mean, it's always tough this time of year, especially as players try to figure out their next move, figure out where they are. We haven't even mentioned the portal being a major game changer and players looking to make new teams, new decisions, because that always throws a wrench into plans there. But I mean, honestly, I do feel that this actually might even be a great year for Minnesota to make some noise in the portal. With you got a good freshman class coming in. Mm-hmm. You don't have that game changer, but maybe you bring in somebody in the portal that has shown that they have that talent and can be that piece to kind of add on to everything that's been built on before with Minnesota. So I expect Minnesota to lose some players. I expect them to gain some things, but I think the core of this team is going to be who you've seen last, who you expect to have come back.
Yeah, exactly. And just talking, I think I was talking with Justin Close near the end of the season too, and it just he was even remarking just on the impact that, all right, yeah, all the guys that came in 5 years ago as freshmen in that big, really, really freshman heavy year, all kind of grew up together and became this team that contended for the national championship. And I think with obviously all these guys now leaving and even some of the graduates that are just finally on their way out, this new freshman class that does have a lot of highlights coming in, has that chance to kind of make that mark. But and like you said too, in the portal, the Gophers haven't been. They've done a couple little things in the portal, but nothing ever completely overhauling, and that's just what you're going to get at Minnesota. But with just the amount of people that want to play here and end up staying here and playing here like for the long haul. But
if there's going to be a year, it's going to be this year though. Just based on where things are, where people are leaving, you lose the extra bonus COVID year after this year. So if there's going to be a year, it's this year. But I really do like their freshman class, but at the same time, we do lose so many fifth-year seniors and just high-end upperclassmen and talent. There is an opportunity to bring in some experienced players. I mean, that is what Minnesota could really use with that season too.
Exactly, and exactly what the portal's seemingly for at this point. Yeah, add grad. I mean, we as this podcast is being recorded, Michigan is being led in goal by the graduate senior that transferred from a team that just barely made the tournament last year, but just kind of didn't really have all the talent there. And just seeing a guy that's that experienced on a team that has all the other pieces, and you can see what they can do. So I think that does it here for us on this episode, this segment of the MNCAA podcast. We'll be back, I believe, next week to talk Frozen Four. Obviously, no Minnesota teams in it. Very weird. I think Jess Myers tweeted that out the other day. The first time since 1994 that a Frozen Four in St. Paul will not have a team from Minnesota win it. So it'll be interesting to see.
First time at the X. It's first time since 2016 that there has been at least one Minnesota team in the Frozen Four. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of fitting though. 2 years ago, there were 2 Minnesota teams in a Boston list Frozen Four in Boston. This time, there's 2 Boston schools and Minnesota list Frozen Four in Minnesota. And hey, we'll be there. So that's really what matters. It's still going to be a lot of really good hockey, and we'll get into it next week.
Oh, yeah, no, we'll talk all of that and more next week when we come back to you. But until next time, until next week, we'll see you at the rink.